Hey, Seattle hockey fans, happy Friday, and we've got quite the episode for you. We're going to talk about going off of my squadcast with JD Young yesterday, and it's kind of in the show notes, but who do we think needs to have a breakout season for the Seattle Kraken? We're also going to talk about the radio broadcast and who will join Everett Fitzhugh now that Dave Tomlinson has stepped aside. And finally, we're going to go through some of our Locked On NHL top 5 lists, as well as some Kraken news that has a little bit of a bark and bite to it. That's coming up on this episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken. This episode of Locked On Kraken is brought to you by FanDuel. That is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn. If you do that today, that's how you can get started. We'll talk about that coming up later on the show. But on today's episode, again, if you watched our Squadcast Everydayers, OGers, we had yesterday a episode where JD Young from Locked On Sharks was asking me, your host, Erica L. Ayala, some questions about the state of the Seattle Kraken franchise. And one of the questions was, and I might be getting the wording a little bit different, but effectively, who has to have a breakout season? Who are we really relying on? And I chose a player. You'll have to listen to Thursday's episode, State of the Franchise, Squadcast with Locked On Sharks. But there's another player that I want to talk about. And I've talked about this player before in passing. We've talked about on the show Locked On Kraken, and you can revisit some of these episodes with our fourth liners effectively gone. Daniel Sprong in Detroit, Ryan Donato in Chicago, and Morgan Geekie going to Boston. We lost out on productivity. We lost out on goals, on points overall. And I broke that down. And then I did the math between adding Dumoulin, Yamamoto, and all of the other additions. We're still short some goals. So who's going to make up for those goals? And I think the top candidate could be, and probably needs to be, Andre Burakovsky. I think my 1B is Oliver Bjorkstrand. And I've mentioned that a time or two before. But because I've mentioned Andre Burakovsky a time or two, I want to take us over to an article that Geoff Baker wrote on just this. It is entitled, Kraken Relying Big on Andre Burakovsky to Rebound from Injury. This is, of course, up on the Seattle Times. If you are watching on YouTube, I now have the headline up on the screen. But don't worry if you're listening on audio only. I will walk us through this. So, Geoff Baker starts by talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs legend Bobby Baun, who recently passed away, and this whole story about a broken leg. And at first, it took me a little while to figure out where he was going with this. But I learned that Andre Burakovsky has battled through injuries. And the case that Geoff is making is that the you don't make them like this anymore does not apply to Andre Burakovsky. And I thought this was interesting because, and again, you can read the article. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But if you read the article, Geoff Baker is making the case that Andre Burakovsky has showed that grit, that fire in the belly, the piss and vinegar, maybe, for those who know that Ryan Donato said that, and I absolutely love that. And we've seen that from Andre Burakovsky before. I forget what game it was right now. Was it that game against LA where Burakovsky's like, this has gotten out of control. Let me handle this. I forget. But there were two goals that stand out in my mind. One was scored by Matty Beniers, and Burakovsky shuffled the puck over to him. And one was an OT goal by Burakovsky himself. It's escaping me at the moment, but I do think he has that, but he had a short-lived season due to a groin injury and then a setback. And so the overtime winner for Colorado against Tampa in game 1 of the 2022 Stanley Cup final is what Geoff is alluding to. But also, Geoff, like myself, did the math. And we have talked about this before. Of course, Jared McCann ended the season as our points leader, but Burakovsky was leading at the time that he went down with injury. We thought we were going to have him back. And then, as I mentioned, he had a setback. But he had 39 points in 49 games. And we've heard Ron Francis talk about this before. I gave a mild update about Andre Burakovsky when Ron Francis was extended because he was asked about that. But Andre Burakovsky is expected to be 100% ready when training camp starts. That's what Ron Francis told Geoff Baker. Geoff Baker also reporting that the Seattle Kraken actually sent a trainer to Sweden to work with Burakovsky. So they have someone that is with him, working with him. And so that's where a lot of that comes. But again, in the article, like I did, Geoff breaks down how many goals were missing. 44 goals, 101 points between Geeky, Donato, and Sprong. 44 goals. So can Burakovsky make that up? Again, he had 39 points in 49 games before dropping. So that would, based on the simple math that I did, given if everyone performs at minimum at what they did last year, that would make up the points. You never know how a player is going to come back from injury. They're always getting reacclimated to their body. And sometimes your body does react differently after an injury. But something that I really enjoyed, and it's something quite honestly I hadn't thought about much, but Andre Burakovsky, missing him on the power play in the playoffs, huge. Andre Burakovsky on his career has 67 power play points, 21 power play goals. In the playoffs, he has 6 power play points, 1 power play goal. In 2022-23 with the Seattle Kraken, he had 14 power play points, including 4 goals. The Seattle Kraken did struggle to be effective on the power play in the playoffs. And against the Stars is what Geoff talks about in particular. The series saw the Kraken outscored 4-2 on power play goals. The Stars got a critical power play tally from Jamie Benn to start them toward a key Game 4 victory at Climate Pledge Arena that prevented the Kraken from taking a 3-1 series stranglehold. Joe Pavelski gave me fits. Big net front presence, power play goal that broke the contest wide open. I mean, he comes back from injury and just annihilates. So the Kraken 2 for 15 on the power play in the Dallas series. You have to be effective on the power play. 2 for 15, yikes. So we'll see. I'm definitely looking for the team overall, playoffs or not, to improve on the power play. And that is the case that Geoff makes. And he ends with a really great quote from Ronnie Francis. Basically, I'm not going to read the whole quote, but it does have to do with the power play. I'll read the little punchline here. So did we miss him? Ron Francis asking, obviously, hypothetically. Did we miss Andre Burakovsky? His response, hell yeah. Hell yeah, we missed Andre Burakovsky. So I love that he's on pace to be 100%. I've talked about how this is going to be a competitive training camp. So to hear that the Seattle Kraken have deployed resources to get Burakovsky back on track, I think also tells you to the extent that they are really expecting him to step it up and be the kind of player that they went and got in free agency. We're going to talk about other open roles, not so much on the ice, but in the radio booth. Who will join our friend of the podcast, Everett Fitzhugh, on the radio broadcast? And then we're going to do the top 5 for Locked On Kraken, but also what's been going on with Davy Jones, the team dog. Kate Shefty has some answers. All that's coming up on Locked On Kraken. As I mentioned earlier, today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by FanDuel. Now listen, football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you will get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Pick any team to win the Super Bowl. Anytime they win in the regular season, you get bonus bets back that you can use towards spreads, player ops, over-unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. And I love FanDuel that the FanDuel odds are now on the WNBA page, so you can find everything you need at FanDuel. We wish you luck. And as always, gamble responsibly. All right, Seattle hockey fans. You can notice this is not my usual setup here. We've got some pineapples. I'm on the road in Coral Springs, Florida for the 2023 Amerigo Latam Cup. And apologies in advance if my voice come next week sounds a little raspy, because today alone I have 7 games starting at 9:30 local time all the way till 9:30 p.m. local time. That's a lot of hockey. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying there are some elements involved that I have to take special care for, including that it is August outside and, January inside. So trying to protect my voice is going to be paramount. So we also might start Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week, as opposed to doing Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, just so I have an extra day of no talking. Okay. But speaking of talking, that is my profession, as is it the profession of Everett Fitzhugh, who we've had on the show before. He's talked us through his very steady rise to being the first Black play-by-play announcer for an NHL team. He is our radio voice and does such a great job. I've talked about Everett and Dave time and time again. I've been able to visit them in the booth. They're overwhelmingly supportive. But we also talked about the news that Dave Tomlinson is moving on. He just wanted to be closer to his native Canada, and he, quote, said, an opportunity in Canada arose. And so since May, we've known that Dave Tomlinson was going to move on. Now, things have not been explicitly announced, at least the last time I checked, on what Dave is doing. But here's what Geoff Baker is saying that the Seattle Kraken are doing, that they are indeed going to be looking for someone to replace Dave Tomlinson. Now, Dave Tomlinson, former hockey player, Geoff's inclination is that the Seattle Kraken will look for another former player to take his stead. And I'm very curious, because I think Everett does a fantastic job. Dave, his energy definitely, I think, heightened by being in a combo with Everett. And I think that there's also an opportunity for the Seattle Kraken to find a unique voice that can add a different layer and complexity to the radio broadcast. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen. But here's the interesting part. According to reporting by Geoff Baker, we are not going to see any familiar faces, or I should say voices, take that role. So another friend of the show, Allison Lucan, outside of anyone from the Locked On Network, I believe Allison Lucan has been the most recurring guest on Locked On Kraken, but we're hearing via Geoff, or I should say Geoff is hearing, that Allison Lucan, nor JT Brown, nor Nick Olczyk are in the running. So we also hear that Tomlinson is going to be helping in some kind of, or Tomlinson's replacement, I should say, KJR, which is the radio station, is going to be serving a kind of advisory role here, as the radio broadcast obviously works very closely with the radio partner. So Geoff posits, though, that Ferraro has limited experience in this capacity. As far as Tomlinson himself, John Garrett, the TV analyst for the Canucks, has stepped aside, and there has been some speculation that Tomlinson could be in the running there behind Ray Ferraro and Corey Hirsch. And, we'll see what happens there, but wanted to report that because the radio broadcast might have a little bit of a different sound and a different flavor. And we know that in the past that Everett Fitzhugh has done solo broadcasts. We also know that Mike Benton has stepped in, including the time I was in the booth with Dave and with Everett in New Jersey, and they had connectivity issues. So Mike Benton and I think it was Ian, right, had to step in and do the call. So listen, that's the biz sometimes. So we'll keep you posted there. But of course, we wish Dave the best of luck. I had nothing but great experiences when I got to come across him. And yeah, it is something to be able to be close to home. But coming up next on Locked on Kraken, I want to talk a little bit about our top 5 lists and then give you a little bit of what's Kraken when it comes to team dog Davy Jones. We got some updates from Kate Shefty. That's coming up on this episode of Locked on Kraken. Thanks as always for making Locked on Kraken a part of your daily destination. We know that there are so many NHL shows. There's so many great outlets that are covering the Seattle Kraken, but in season, we are the only one that comes to you 5 days a week. So make sure you stay locked on Kraken right here. And once you finish over here, go to Locked on NHL. Today, I have a women's hockey spotlight. Angela Ruggiero to the Rangers, Brian Burke to women's hockey, and China moves up to the top tier in women's IIHF standings and the top women's division. That's just a little taste of what you'll get on the Women's Hockey Spotlight for today, Friday. Okay, I mentioned this a time or two. We went through all the top 5 that the Seattle Kraken were represented in. So the Locked on NHL channel, one show for every team in the NHL. We often do rankings. And like I said, it's list season, it's ranking season. And so we've talked about how the Seattle Kraken were on the top NHL logo. We were number 5. We have the top 5, which is what I'll be showing you graphics of. But then if you follow Locked on NHL on social media, you can see the full top 10 list. Then we also had players under 22, NHL players under 22. I've gone off on this on a few podcasts, but Maddie Beniers is on that list. But then we start seeing lists where the Seattle Kraken are not on this list, including, I'm going to start here because top 5 mascots, and nowhere in sight is Buoy. Gritty, I do not understand the obsession with Gritty. The New Jersey Devil, I have to say, I'm okay with the New Jersey Devil being there. But we lose out to a dog, a duck, and a coyote. I feel some kind of way about that, fam. I feel some kind of way about that. We know in our hearts where Buoy is, so I guess it doesn't matter. But it's just overall, I feel like overall there's a real lack of taste. I'm saying that somewhat joking, but also I have thoughts. I have feelings. No, I mean, these are what lists are for, right? Everything is subjective. Top centers, also no representation from the Seattle Kraken, but we talked about this a little bit. And I think the Locked on NHL show, the Western Conference Roundup that happens every Tuesday, did a good job talking about how eventually I do think Maddie Beniers, if he continues on the trajectory he's on now, will make this list. And I think we need it. Same thing when it comes to top wingers. Not a Kraken in sight. Am I surprised? I can't say that I am. We're hardworking, we're blue collar, we're lunch pail type of guys. And that's just fine for us because at the end of the day, winning matters more than these lists. That being said, and it's the push and pull, the give and go. JD Young and I talked about it on our Squadcast for Thursday. If you're an everydayer, you hear me talk about this all the time. In the 3 to 5 year plan, we are in year 3 of that 3 to 5 year plan, at least for the on ice product, while we're playing games, I should say. Something has got to give. I didn't expect it to happen this free agency. I think it should probably start at the trade deadline and then an aggressive free agent period in the next 2 seasons is my best guess. Some of that is contingent, of course, on what the landscape is, who is a free agent, what is available to us. But we have to start really getting into that upper echelon when it comes to just elite talent. You can win the way the Kraken have won, and that's okay for now because we're building foundational pieces. But eventually, we're really going to have more than one guy that can really carry a team. And again, we talked about this at the top of the show. I think the expectation is that Andre Burakovsky gets us closer to that than anyone else. I think Jared McCann, what we're getting from him has been a bonus. I think what we got from Vince Dunn has been a bonus. I think the potential of even an Eberle or a Schwartz to do that in sprinkles, all things that we want. But inevitably, eventually, I mean, kind of look at these lists, right? Pastrnak, Tkachuk, Robertson, Marner, Kucherov, Draisaitl, McDavid, McKinnon, Matthews, Hughes. I mean, these are household names for a sport that arguably is fighting for attention in North America. We need some of that. Zegras, Beniers, and it's coming. It is coming. So it's a matter of being a little bit patient, but then also the Seattle Kraken striking at the right time. So to be continued there. But as promised, we're going to close the show with an interesting story here. Also coming from the Seattle Times, lots of love for the Seattle Times today, but Kate Shefty answering a question that I have seen pop up on the interwebs, and that is why Kraken team dog Davy Jones stepped back from the spotlight. Now, what a cute little boy here. And I really didn't understand the entire concept of having a team dog. And I know I said that on the podcast before. I've seen teams, the WNBA does it, where they will support like a rescue drive or, you know, a local kind of animal shelter, and they'll do calendars and they'll say, hey, meet Lucky or whatever the case is. And if you're interested in fostering or adopting, you know, I've seen that before. But to have a dog committed to the team, it just seems a little odd to me. Like, who takes care of the dog? That just seems like a lot going on. And apparently my instinct was right because poor Davy Jones was suffering from anxiety. If you read some of the captions under these adoptions, I mean, some of these dogs or animals have been through some traumatic things. And just like humans, animals overall, it takes some time to adjust and to adapt. And so it seems like that was what was happening with Davy Jones. And to the credit of the Seattle Kraken, they opted for the health and wellness of Davy Jones and not just kind of the optics of having a team dog. So Davy Jones did have to be relocated just due to some circumstances, another dog in the household. Again, animals overall are territorial, but also animals who are younger or who have experienced trauma. Like, there's all kinds of things and elements that come into play. And so they had to rehouse Davy Jones. New owner, at least one of the new owners, is a Seattle Kraken season ticket holder. So there's that connection there. But it's just about finding what's right for Davy Jones. And I support that. I support that. What do we say at the end of every show? We've been doing it for a while now, right? Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And we can extend that to our fur babies, right? You know, be kind to the earth. Hello, you know, climate change. But I thought this is great reporting from Kate. A little bit of an aside to what we usually talk about, hard-nosed hockey, especially as we get closer and closer to what I believe not only will be, but what has to be the most competitive training camp coming up. This is a little bit of levity, but also just a reminder that the plans that we have in our head and how things pan out are not always the same. And we can work hard to have the plan be executed, but not everything is under and in our control. And there's always an opportunity to act with kindness and to step back. We know we have deliverables and expectations, but there are also ways to be thoughtful, to be caring for yourself and for other people. So thanks, Kate Shefty, for that. Thank you, Geoff Baker, for the update on Dave Tomlinson and for a reflective look to add more texture and context to conversations we've been having right here on Locked On Kraken. Who is going to make up the goals that we lost from our entire fourth line being gone? And I would have liked, if I'm being honest, for the answer to be more evidently clear coming up into this part of the offseason. But again, I agree with Geoff Baker that the Seattle Kraken are hedging their bets, not just on Burakovsky, but on McCann, on Dunn, and I personally think that they're expecting more from Bjorkstrand, and I would add Justin Schultz to that mix. So we'll see how it all plays out. I can't believe we're so close to getting to preseason. I just want us to get to preseason. I'm so excited. More will come on ways, if you want, to support Locked On Kraken in our attempt to get out to as much training camp and preseason as possible. That's coming up next week and in the weeks to come. As I say, I'll say it again on this episode, be kind to yourselves, be kind to each other. And as we say, loud and proud, hold fast, stay true. Wishing you the best, Davy Jones, and let's go Kraken. I'll see you on the next episode. Have a lovely weekend. Peace.